How we doing, everybody? Welcome back to the Captain Toad Treasure Tracker commentary. I want to thank you for all of your patience with all these episodes, because I know it's been a while. But with that, let's go into this thing, which is not a level, but it's not a cutscene either. It's very different from anything we've really seen in the game so far, and it's just kind of out of place, honestly. It's like a mini game, kind of, but it doesn't really give you anything. It gives you a ton of coins, I suppose, but you're riding on top of Pyropuff here, and you're just kind of roaring and breathing some fire, and I mean, I'm not gonna say it's not fun, because it is, but I just don't really see its place here. So it just seems like one of those things where, like, a developer made it in their free time as they were going through with their stuff, and then, you know, they had to put it in the game somewhere, because someone took their paid time to make it, so they had to put it in the game. But it just doesn't really fit in with anything else. So maybe there was a point in development where they had more mini games like this, and then they just cut them out and put cutscenes there instead. But I'm not really sure of the place in there. So it is what it is. But we'll move on to level 10 here. And I know it took a while for the last 9 levels, you know, since then. But we'll manage. So I really like this third gem placement here, because you can either rotate the platforms to get to it, or you can just throw the turnip right there. And speaking of rotating platforms, that's somewhat the gimmick here. So you have to rotate these like cog-shaped platforms, right, in order to get through the level and navigate your way around. So there's three different spin wheels that'll help us accomplish that goal, and they obviously rotate the different colored cogs. And I really like this it's a neat idea, right? And it's a neat use of the spin wheels, and it's a really nice deal. But what I want to talk about in this level is actually not about those at all. I want to talk about failure states, which, you know, in a puzzle game, that kind of sounds weird that I would want to talk about that, but, you know, trust me on this. If you look at the bottom of this level, there's this like sandy part at the bottom, and it's just the base of the level, but there's nothing down there for the most part. There's a few coins, and there's actually going to be a gold mushroom down there as well, but aside from that, there's really no purpose for it being there, right? And you might think, okay, well, if you fall off the cogs, then you'll fall down there, and then you can come back up, but at the same time, you can die in this game, right? Like, there's a life counter at the top, you can get hit by enemies, and there have been levels where we can just flat out fall and die, right? So what's the point of that being there? Should it be there? Should you just fall to your death? Because if you fall down, right, to a platform, then, you know, it debatably takes longer to get back up to where you were than it does for just the level to restart and you to go back to where you were from there. So what's the worst punishment? Is it falling down to the bottom, or is it, you know, having the level immediately restart? And games like Mario Sunshine had this issue too, where, you know, you didn't really ever lose lives aside from the little minigame areas, the secret levels, right? Because you would just fall in a body of water and then have to swim and climb your way back up. But what's the worst punishment there? And I want to ask that same question here, especially in a puzzle game, right? Like, the puzzle game is about sitting and thinking and solving the puzzle, but I feel like this game kind of draws its little happy middle ground, which is something that I've complimented before. But, you know, then you have to decide, you know, where to draw the line on some of these things. And I don't think Nintendo really did that. I mean, it's not something you notice unless you really look into it, right? So, once again, petty complaints, but it's still worth something. It's something worth talking about, right? Something worth discussing, and I think it's an interesting thought process to go about when you're taking something that's running on an engine for a traditional platformer game, and then what you do to change that, and where the priorities shift, and where the goals shift for the player and the developer, for that matter, when you're trying to accomplish those things. So I didn't really talk too much about the design, but it's a fairly simple puzzle, and I really like its execution. But the pathway, the little, you know, spot on the bottom, kind of, it didn't irk me. You know, it's fine being there, but it's just interesting why they chose to put it there, right? It's just an interesting discussion. It's not really a criticism, but it's something worth mentioning anyway, and it's something we'll talk about a bit later. And we got our gold mushroom, and we did all that. We got all 3 of our gems, did everything we needed to do. So we'll go into the next level, which I also quite like. I mean, it's not This one I wouldn't define as one of my favorites. I would just define it as really neat and just memorable overall. And I think something Nintendo does well, in addition to good level design, is memorability, right? Like, there's certain parts of games that you play by Nintendo that you just happen to remember because they were designed cleverly, or there was just something interesting about it. And here, I mean, if you listen to the music in the background, you might get a hint at what's going on. And if you look really closely, you might see too, but I'm not going to point it out quite yet what I'm thinking of. But, you know, moving platforms have always been a staple of the Mario games and Nintendo games in general, for that matter. And I'm not saying that other games don't have moving platforms, because that would be really stupid of me to say that, you know. I just lost all credibility by saying that. But if you look on the back, you'll see that there's a little turn key thing for like a wind-up toy. And then if you listen to the music, I mean, I mentioned it before, but it's like a Toy Box remix of a song we've already heard. And I think that's amazing. I just think that's so clever that, you know, they decided, let's design this level around this moving platform back and forth, which is already a really unique idea that we haven't seen anywhere else, right? But in addition to that, then let's create a really somewhat realistic, I mean, this game is not realistic, it's floating platforms, right? But I do think that sometimes having some sort of relatable rationale for why things happen, I think really does make levels more memorable. And that doesn't mean you shoot for straight realism, right? And Nintendo never does, really. But I do think that those kind of world-building elements, even in a game like Captain Toad, really do help the game, you know, in terms of memorability. I think it really helps memorability than anything else. I mean, adding a wind-up to the back of your level doesn't really do much else other than make people notice it, right? So I do think memorability is important, and world-building does too, absolutely. Even if it isn't something I overly appreciate, you know, world building, because I think gameplay takes precedence over plot, right? But I do think things like this is where world building is really, really special and unique, and you don't really see that anywhere else. So that's why I like the level. You know, the design of it's great, the level design and how you walk around and stuff, and the idea of parallel moving platforms. But I think it's the context for that really makes that level so interesting. And once again, we do have that golden mushroom goal. And, you know, even though I do like it sometimes, I do think it is a bit lazy for them to do gold mushrooms all the time. So it'd be neat if they had, you know, some other puzzles. Like the puzzle on this one, which if you notice, all of the P-switches down there, we only can hit a certain number of them, which 3 of them to be specific, and I think that's a much more interesting goal than finding your hidden gold mushroom that you can only see if you step on the same like area as it, right? But that doesn't mean the gold mushrooms are bad, right? Because I do think there's a place for them. And speaking of clever, let's throw that baddie over there and get that 3rd gem, and then fall down and get our last gem. But I do really think that some of the... I would much rather see some of the more clever ideas for secondary goals than just, you know, find the gold mushroom. But that doesn't mean the gold mushrooms don't have their place, because there are plenty of times when they do place the gold mushrooms in genuinely interesting places. And if a player keeps their eye out for them, right, then it provides an interesting goal, and it allows them to look in places they might not otherwise think about. And like I mentioned at the start of this book, right, there is gold mushrooms even hidden in the opening bits. And I think that's really, really interesting and provides some neat stuff. So, yeah, you know, using the P-switches to limit the player like that, especially when the P-switches send the gates up and down like that, I think that requires you to think about the level in a different way. And that's what I really think those secondary goals should do, as opposed to, you know, just, you know, look at the level and stuff. So anyway, we're going to go into the next level here, which is, on the contrary, something I really don't like that much, and it's this level here. And you can kind of see why I wouldn't like it, maybe. And it's just kind of a mess, right? And the idea of having to navigate through clear pipes is perfectly fine for a concept, but I feel like the execution here is just really, really bad, because if you're looking straight forward, you can't even make head or tail of this. And if you're looking at a maze, like, say, on paper, right, like a 2D maze, I mean, this obviously isn't two-dimensional, right, but you can see the entire thing, and that's where solving it becomes interesting, because you're trying to figure out how to navigate through it. It's not about trying to understand how it's laid out to begin with, and here, that's not the problem, right? Like, you have to use the camera to look around and try and figure out where the maze is, which is perfectly fine using the camera in that way, but I don't think it should be used in a way that you know, confuses you more, right? And it's especially hard when you're standing on the beginning platform and trying to figure out where the maze is. You have to be in the maze to understand where the maze is, and I don't think that's the way you should be going about it. I think you should be able to use the camera to figure out the maze while not being in the maze constantly moving, because in the clear pipes, right, you are constantly moving. So what I think happened here is the level went into QA, and QA didn't like it, so they added those weird donut loops to try and make up for the fact that you can't look through the maze on your own time. And I don't think that's the way it should be done. I really don't. I think it should be, you know, say the platform is in the middle and you had to look all around you. That's a better use of 360 degrees, and it makes better use of the camera trying to figure out, right, how to get through the maze. And I think that's just the better way to go about it. That being said, you know, the placement of items and stuff is really pretty good. And I particularly like using the pickaxe and then having to run over to where the spiny guys are blocking the gem. I thought that was a really unique, not puzzle really, but just something that required you to already know the puzzle, right, before doing that. So you had to think about it first, but it would have been better to think about that on the center platform when not going through the maze and potentially dying. It just kind of feels cheap in some ways, right? So I didn't like that level that much, but to each their own. It's a unique level. You don't see anything like that elsewhere. So to the level's credit, I do think doing something different is something that should be praised regardless. So something just kind of fell into the book here, and that's called the Mummy Me Maze, which is something different from the Coins Galores that we've seen before, but it pretty much serves the same purpose, right? Your whole goal is to just get as many coins as possible and get some lives and stuff like that. But the deal here is, instead of using this particular item, the gimmick is that you're being chased by this mummy version of yourself, and it basically follows your every move, similar to the clone Marios in Mario Galaxy 2, 3D Land, and 3D World. I don't think they were in 3D World that much, actually, because of the multiplayer, but definitely in 3D Land. And I really like how they work here, because I think in the Galaxy 2 and, like, 3D Land, having to jump and things like that and navigate them that way didn't provide much of a challenge, where here, since you're only moving at a limited speed, it really does require you to keep moving, which I think is a better use of that ideology. Which, I mean, Nintendo likes to recycle their ideas all the time, but I think when they want to implement it in a way that genuinely makes things a bit better, I think that's when they should do it. So now we actually get our sexy campfire cutscene, so, and this time it's in the jungle too, so, I mean, it's pretty much the same cutscene, but I will still leave you to it regardless. And that's when Nintendo claims my video for copyright. Moving on to the next level, I don't really enjoy it, but that's probably the wrong way to put it. It's more forgettable than anything else. And I mean that not in, like, I don't like this level or it's a bad level sort of way. Like, it's a perfectly capable level, but I don't know. I feel like throughout this commentary, right, I've always talked about what purpose a level serves, right? Like, what it does right, what it does in terms of the overall picture, and what it teaches players, or what it tests players on. And this level doesn't really do any of that. It doesn't do anything interesting, there's nothing really neat about it, so it just kind of feels like it's there. And sure, there are probably other levels that you could do that, say that about too, and I haven't really mentioned it then, but I think this level more than any other is just one that kind of just feels like it's just kind of there and doesn't do anything. I mean, yeah, you threw that key over that fence. That's something you haven't done before, right? But I don't think there's any other point in the game where it's actually mandatory to do that. So that's not a teaching moment. Like, there's no way you could call that a teaching moment, because there's no test afterwards. That's how that sort of design works. If you're going to teach some players about something, then you have to have something to show for it. You can't just say, oh, here's something you can do that we're never going to have you do again. And yeah, you do use that throw over fence mechanic to do something optional, but you know, it's not something that's mandatory, and I don't think you need to teach players something that's only going to be used for optional content or optional secrets. You know, if it's a secret, let them figure it out. So that's the only thing I can think of that this level does that hasn't been seen before. It doesn't do anything that stands out or is interesting or serves any purpose in terms of teaching the player, in terms of the overall picture, the overall, even the plot, right? Like, this game doesn't really have much of a plot, so I'm not going to say it in terms of that. But, you know, if you're making a level in the game that is key to the plot, right, then that's also important, and that justifies the level's existence. But there's no justification for this level being here, other than the fact that it's an original level that was made and is somewhat entertaining. And, you know, maybe for a lot of players that is enough justification, but I mean, I guess I'm a level design fanatic and a game design fanatic, and because of that, I suppose I really would just have this level cut. And yeah, it's a waste of the developer's time, I suppose. And if you took the time to make a level, might as well throw it in there. Just kind of like you throw in a dumb ride on the back of the fire-breathing dragon guy. Oh, he breathes fire at blocks. Let's just keep him in there because it's only, you know, a few minutes anyway. Or in this level's case, a few minutes, and the other thing, like, you know, even less than that. But it just kind of feels like, and I don't want to use this word, right, because it kind of has a bad taste to it, but padding, you know, the idea that it's just something that extends the game time and that's about all it does. And sure, you know, it took development time to make this. It's not like you're backtracking to a previous spot to get some random artifact, or you flip the castle upside down, you know? So, you know, in some respects, I guess it isn't padding, but I can't fully refrain from using that word. Because I can't defend this level's existence. And I think that's something you should be able to do in a truly great game in terms of level design. But the next level I don't have those kind of critiques about. It perfectly justifies its existence because there isn't really a level that does something like this. Like, there are other levels that have the double cherry, and there are other levels that have you controlling two Toadettes at the same time, absolutely. But I feel like this is the first puzzle where the puzzle itself isn't about the double cherry, right? The puzzle isn't can you navigate two Toadettes at once? No. The puzzle is completely different, but it requires you to use both Toadettes. So it's saying, this is an inherent skill that you have, so prove it. With all these other puzzles involving hitting switches, figuring out which ones to hit first, and then where to go from there, and then especially when finding the secret involving that locked door over there, how do you get the key over there? And I'll tell you, it does involve, in fact, throwing a key over a fence, but, you know, that's neither here nor there. And so because of that, I do think, like I said, this level has some sort of justification for its existence. And so that might be harsh, but I do think that, you know, the argument that, you know, it isn't padding because it's fun isn't really a reasonable excuse. And like I said, other people might disagree with me, and that's fine, because people play games for different reasons, you know, you know, to each their own, I think, is the best way to put it. It's not something I can say is objectively wrong with the game. And I think, you know, I've gone through this, and, you know, it's been over an hour and a half of analysis, right? And I think we're at a point, especially later in the game like this, where you can't, you know, there is no black or white answer. It's very gray, and criticism is a gray thing. It's a very subjective. So you might find that last level to be your favorite level in the game, but it most certainly is not mine, because what tests a good level for me is whether you can defend its existence. And I don't think you can defend that level's existence. Where here, I do think you can defend it. So that's my thought on that anyway. And I know I might have spoke a bit too, was a bit too long-winded on that one, but I think it's important. I think it's one of the main things I wanted to talk about today anyway. Even though most of the other levels here, they do justify their existence, and they're really, really good levels up ahead. So I'm looking forward to that. There's no major bad levels, which is for the last few, which is really nice, because you know, I haven't refrained from saying that there are bad levels in this game, absolutely. So especially navigating this right Toadette, I apologize, up top here, and then you have to have her fall down onto the other Toad platform. I mean, luckily the other Toad's kind of locked into position there, so that kind of cheapens, I suppose, the puzzle there, but I still think it's quite difficult on its own, honestly. But this next level I do really enjoy, so No more of that. And I really like this level because it just isn't a mechanic that I like, and Nintendo's done it a lot. The idea that you use your enemies to help you progress, and that's basically what the whole Wario Land series is about, right? That's the best example of that. But I really like its use here because, unlike a lot of other enemies in games, bullet bills are consistent. They're only firing in one direction, but they're gonna hurt you if you're in their path. They're going to hurt you, and absolutely in this level there are times where you need to move a cannon out of the way to make sure it doesn't shoot you. And this might remind you of a similar level, and that's perfectly absolutely reasonable. Is a level back in Book 1 where we had to use spin wheels to spin a bullet bill cannon. But I think the difference here is touchstones are just so much more consistent. And if you remember back then, I know this is a long time ago now, but we had to kind of awkwardly 45-degree spin the spin wheel in order to get the bullet bill to break a block. And I think that's just because if you're only restricted to 90-degree movement and you're trying to do crazy stuff like that, it just doesn't work as well. And they couldn't have you spin wheel all of the bullet bill cannons at the same time, and they couldn't place like 1,000 spin wheels in the level either, because that's just really confusing. So I think just having the bullet bills on touchstones is just so much more elegant, and I think that's the best way to put it. It's elegant because you're only managing one set of cannons at a time, so nothing ever really feels cheap or unwanted. Everything you do is your mistake, and that's just good design when it's your fault and not the game's fault for doing anything. So I think in that respect, I think this level succeeds with flying colors at achieving that goal of using enemies to accomplish what you need to accomplish in order to get through the level. So that's why that's anyway why I enjoy this level. An interesting thing that happens in this level actually is right here, something I do. If you look, the bullet bill being shot by the right cannon was actually blocking the two bullet bills on the cannon that I'm facing, so I had to move the right one in order to move the other ones. And I think that's also a neat idea, that you have to watch out for stuff that you may have changed earlier that may affect you later. This isn't any sort of Undertale, suffer for your consequences sort of thing, but it's multitasking is what it is, and this game excels at having players multitask, and I think that's essentially what the game's challenge is as a whole, more than anything else, is the ability to multitask. So in that respect, this level is fantastic. I really, really enjoy it. It's probably the best level in Book 2 that we've seen thus far, and I'm being very careful with my words because there's one other level in this book that is by far my favorite level in this entire book, and probably in all of Book 1 and Book 2 for that matter. So you can look forward to that, and if I'm praising this level as much as I am, then that means that next level really does something right. And in terms of anything else, right, like item placement and things like that, I haven't really talked about that as much because, for the most part, they're placed in very simple, for lack of a better word, locations. So they're out of the way, right, but they're not they're not completely off the beaten path. You're not backtracking through the entire level to get to them, which I think is the ideal scenario. So in that respect, I think this level succeeds as well, and a lot of previous levels as well, not just this one. But, I kind of hit it, but, there's only 2 levels left, so, process of elimination determines if it's not the last level, which I'm telling you it's not. It's got to be this level. Spin Wheel Skyfort is a fantastic level, I can't say I like the spin wheels that much. I criticized them last time with use of the bullet bills, but this is the perfect use for them. If anything justifies the spin wheels being in this game, it's this level. The reason why is because the idea of spinning something, right? What does that correlate with? It correlates obviously with rotating things, and the game has pretty much exclusively had you rotate things with spin wheels, although there were some times where you cranked up a platform, which I don't really think is right. But if you look, when we spin the spin wheel, it literally is rotating half of the stage, and I think that's just brilliant. I absolutely think that's brilliant, and it's fantastic. Like, the only parts of the stage that aren't rotating are the parts where the spin wheels are, right? And but the entire stage is rotating, so it's almost like, I don't want to say it's like 4 stages in one, because that's kind of overselling it, right? Because the stage is the idea of having to rotate the stage like this, but I think it's just a brilliant concept. And when you think of the word puzzle, right, you're generally thinking like a jigsaw puzzle, something you have to piece together. And in terms of rotating stuff to fit together in the way that you need it to fit together, I mean, this is the closest you'll get to a 3D jigsaw puzzle in a video game, aside from, you know, I don't know, Banjo-Kazooie level stuff. Mostly in Banjo. It was in Banjo-Tooie, wasn't it? Where you had to, like, you know, have the hand grab the puzzle pieces. Like, aside from that, right? Like, this is the closest you're going to get to a genuine, like, almost jigsaw puzzle in a video game. And I think if you're calling it a puzzle game, like, what better thing to put in there than something that almost resembles a jigsaw puzzle? And, you know, I might be overselling it. It's more of a Rubik's Cube than it is a jigsaw puzzle, but I mean, that's genuinely how I feel about it. It's absolutely brilliant. I can't stop singing its praises, and I know it wasn't overly specific, right? But I think it's just the concept alone sells the level for me, more than anything else. So, and when it comes to concept, right, it's just that idea. That's really all there is, and the execution's great too. I can't say I'm a huge fan of those homing bullet bills because they can be unpredictable at times, but you know, that provides an extra bit of challenge aside from the normal mundanity of predictability. And bullet bills are great, right? Especially when you're trying to use them to your advantage, like in the previous level. But I think most enemies chase you in this game, and I think that's what adds the challenge to solving puzzles. It adds some sort of I want to say hecticness, but that's probably not the best way to word it. Tension is probably the better way to word it. Yeah, because, you know, you have to run away. And since there's no timer, which there shouldn't be a timer, that would make the game not as good, in my opinion. But the idea that, you know, there are actual things that are coming after you, I think, really helps amplify that. So even though homing bullet bills can be a bit unpredictable, perfect in this level. Perfect execution in this level. Is it my favorite level in the whole game? Maybe, but I won't say for certain right now. But yeah, we're at our last level, Battle Tower Blitz, and if that name doesn't tell you anything, we're not fighting Wingo today. We're not fighting any boss today, in fact, which, you know, that's a bit strange. We've always ended these videos with fighting a boss, but we're not doing that this time. And, you know, what's replacing it? You know, I would rather see a boss, honestly, even though, in all honesty, like, I'm not sure, because the bosses in this game are, you know, they don't really fit the rest of the design in some respects, especially Wingo. But that doesn't mean I don't like them being there, and I think it's a nice formality to have almost. So the fact that it isn't here, you know, I can't say I miss it, but I can't say I like it either. But the thing that replaces it anyway is something really clever, which revolves entirely around enemy patterns and clear pipes, pretty much. And it's the idea that, you know, how do you defeat these enemies since you can't jump and you don't really have much ammunition? And it's about finding some sort of outside way to do so. So in this case, it was about going in the clear pipes outside there, and over here, it's about figuring out which thing to throw the vegetable into. Since you can't climb up there and attack with a vegetable, the only way to do it is through those clear pipes, and sure enough, the clear pipes are actually crisscrossed, and there's a bit of a hint there on its own, but obviously you can rotate the camera to tell you what you need to tell you. So I just really enjoy the concept on this one too, and you know, execution matters, absolutely, but I think having a good idea is sometimes is all enough. I mean, in all honesty, the idea alone can sometimes sell me on a level or a game or anything. Now, you might have noticed I kind of missed the first gem, and I already have all 3 gems collected, and that's because I didn't meet the secondary requirement, but our second gem is under here, if you're curious, since I didn't show it off in this particular run of the stage. But the reason why is because we need to get just a crap ton of coins, like the last 18th level, and I missed some of those hidden coins that we may have seen earlier, so it is what it is anyway. And what will get us most of the coins, actually, is defeating this just crap ton of enemies over here. And, you know, is it a bit of a cluster? Yeah, but I think navigating around them is an interesting challenge anyway, and you can use the Hammer Brothers to help you out a little bit, so it's not too bad. But you know, I can't say it's the greatest thing, you know, ever. You know, would I have changed the level design a little bit? Maybe, but you know, I'm no level designer, so I'm just the guy that's playing the game and tell you how I think about it, right? So we'll use this cannon to defeat all these guys and get all of the coins we could ever dream of in order to meet our requirement here. And I mean, that's pretty much it. to this level. And I know that this video definitely wasn't as long as the last one. And usually it's the odd-numbered videos that tend to be longer for this one. And we have 2 more left, and they're probably going to be longer than these past 2. But either way, I thank you for watching and being patient and having to deal with the long video length and all that stuff, because, in all honesty, this series was an experiment. And, you know, for what it's worth, I hope you appreciate, you know, and not appreciate, you know, I'm no god or anything, right? But I hope you enjoy it anyway, because I put some time into it, and I certainly enjoy making them, so... that's that, I suppose. But there's a bit of a twist. So that's basically it for this video. So I know I kind of just touched on topics this time as opposed to what I normally do, where I go into something more in depth, but that's kind of what this video warranted, something a bit more laid back, just kind of touching on topics and letting you think about them and talk to me about them in the comments, right? But we have 1 more book left, like I said, 2 more videos, so I will see you then.